Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to cut this style that you can see on the screen. So let's just get into it. So first you're going to need a cardboard paper or a pattern paper, and I've marked 1/2 inch into the cardboard for my starting line. I've marked my bust, under bust, waist and seam allowance line. So next line is to measure the shoulders. My shoulder measurement is 16 divided by 2. I'll have 8. So I'm just going to place that on that starting line. I'm just going to mark out that 8 inches. Then for my neck width, how wide my neck opening will be, that's 3 inches. Then for the depth, also 3 inches. I'm just marking it all through so that it's going to be straight when I connect it together. So now I'm going to come down by 1 inch at the end of that 8-inch mark for my shoulder, and I'm going to connect together to form my shoulder slope. After that, I'm going to mark my chest line, which is the bust measurement divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, that's 1.5 inches. I'm just marking the 8 inch for the shoulder so that it's going to be straight when I hold my straight line. So after that, I'm going to connect the chest line and mark it out. Then at the middle of the chest line, I'm going to mark that point, and then I'm going to go in by 1/2 inch, so that I'm going to, then at the edge I'm also going to come up by 1.5 inch so I could make my armhole curve. Then after that, I'm going to mark my dart lines, which is 4.5 inches. It's actually 9 inches divided by 2. Since this is on fold, it's going to be 4.5 inches. This is where I'm going to be placing my dart so that the dart line will sit evenly on my body. So after I've rolled the straight line from the chest line down to the seam allowance, I'm going to be marking my yoke because I want to know where to start and end this dart. So for the yoke, I'm going to be stopping it at 7.5 inches. This is where the black fabric would stop. After marking that, I'm going to extend my dart line up to that yoke point. Then from the bust line, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. This is where my dart will start expanding. Then at the under bust line, I'm going to be using 1/2 and a little quarter. I don't know what they call it, but that's what I call it. So you can use whatever width you want to use. If it's 1/2 inch, if it's 1 inch, if it's 1.5 inch on both sides. Just depends on how big your bust is. But this is what I use. I use 1/2, 1/4 of an inch, almost 1 inch. So that's what I put on both sides. If you have a bigger bust, you could use 1.5 inch, but the normal measurement would be around 1 inch, like the standard. When you're done with that, you're just going to make a curve to stop at that point of the dart that we measured earlier. You could use broken lines first so that it's going to be accurate, or you could use a curve, a French curve, if you have any curve ruler you have. I'm just marking it out so that I would know and everybody know that that's place is the dart. Now at the top of this dart line, I came out 1/2 inch on both sides, and then I'm going to just curve it from the bust line to reach that 1/2 inch. I'm also going to mark out that dart area, and now this 1 inch, we're going to account for it by the side, because by the time we join the yoke back to this body, we want everything to match. We don't want one to be shorter than the other. So this is what I'm doing. I'm just extending it by 1 inch, which is that dart I removed there. So now I'm going to mark my bust measurement divided by 4, which is around 9.5 inches. It's 37 divided by 4, 9.5 inches. And then for the waist, I'm going to mark it at the seam allowance point. That is 30 divided by 4, which is 7.5. Then I'm going to connect the waist measurement down to the chest line. I don't usually use the under bust measurement when I'm doing this. Then I'm going to mark my dart allowance plus my seam allowance. That allowance is 1.5, and then sewing allowance is 1 inch, so that is 2.5. Then at the chest line, this armhole side, I'm going to be using 2 inches. Ignore the other line there, I made a mistake when I was drafting. So now I'm going to connect that 2.5 at the waist down to the 2 inch at the top. So after that, you're going to cut it out. Don't forget the 1 inch extra we added. And then you cut out the yoke later on, but I'm going to be using this front piece to cut out the back piece before I cut out the yoke finally. So after I've marked all the lines, I marked my dart line, the 4.5, and at the waistline, I came out by 1/2 inch on both sides and I connected it down to the bust line. So now I'm just marking my waist and bust measurement, transferring it to the chest line, and then I'm going to connect it. Then now for my seam allowance, the dart and the sewing allowance together, and then 2 inch at the chest line. Mark that out, and the next thing will be to just cut it out. So now I've cut out the yoke and the dart. I'll do the same for the front, and then the next thing would be to draft the skirt. So at the top of the folding, I came down by 1 inch for joining allowance, and the length of the skirt for me is 47 plus 2 inch allowance, that is 49. So now I'm just going to mark from my high waist down to my hip. It is 8.5. This I'm going to take my hip measurement divided by 4 at. So now I've divided that, and what I have is 10. I'm going to mark that out. So after marking it out, the remaining 2 inches will be the sewing allowance. Then at the waist, I marked my waist measurement 2. Then I'm going to add the sewing allowance. So you connect those 2 measurements together, and then for the pencil skirt effect, I usually measure what I have on my hip line plus the seam allowance. Here I have 11 half 1/4, almost 12, and I usually remove 1.5 to 2 inches from this measurement, and that is what I will use to mark on the hem of the skirt, so that it will be smaller than the hip. Then everything is just going to connect in a slanted line to make the pencil skirt shape. If it's too big for you after sewing, you can always adjust it, but this method always works for me. So now what I have is 9 half 1/4 after removing 1.5 inch from it, or 2 inches. I did not count it well. Then you cut it out, and then you use the same measurement to cut out the back. When you're cutting out the back, remember to add 1 inch extra for the zip allowance, and then also add 1 inch extra by the waist side, so that you can use it and draft for your. You can use it and sew your back darts. You know that skirts usually have darts at the back. I did not add mine here, but I found a way to do it. But in case you're cutting yours, remember to add 1 inch extra at that waistline, then blend it into the hip. So now after that, this is the skirt completed. So remember, this style has a slit in the middle, so we are going to likely open up this front piece and join it together. So for your sewing allowance of the front, remember to add an extra 1 inch. If you usually use 1.5, please make it 2.5, so that by the time you open up the slit in the front and you join it back together, you will still have enough to use to sew. So now I'm going to cut out the lining pieces for every piece of fabric. I'm going to cut the front piece, I'm going to cut out the lining piece for it, and also for the skirt. So when you're cutting this out, remember to keep seam allowance for the side that you're going to join together. The down does not need, because the seam allowance is already on the pattern. You keep seam allowance for the top. The side of the front will not need, the side of the back will not need, because there's seam allowance there. But every other part that you're going to be joining together, you will need seam allowance. Like, look at how I'm cutting it. There's seam allowance in the front and by the side. Remember to do that for yours too. You won't need on the zip side. On the armhole curve, everywhere, you need at least 1/2 inch seam allowance around there, even for the yoke. So that is basically the drafting pattern. I'll see you in the part 2, which is the sewing pattern. Thank you for watching. Bye.